The diner on 5th Street was busy that Tuesday afternoon. Plates clinked, coffee machines hissed, and tired waitresses moved quickly between tables. Among them was Grace Coleman, a 28-year-old woman with a warm smile and gentle eyes. She carried trays with practiced ease, even though her feet ached after 6 hours on her shift. Grace was plus-size, confident, and kind to everyone who walked through the diner doors. But behind her cheerful smile, she carried a quiet disappointment. Grace had a full nursing degree, earned with years of hard work and sacrifice. Yet no hospital in the city had hired her. Every interview ended the same way, polite smiles, followed by rejection letters that never explained the real reason. Grace suspected the truth, even if nobody said it directly. She had seen the way some interviewers looked at her, judging her size before even reviewing her qualifications. So instead of working in a hospital saving lives, she served coffee and sandwiches to strangers every single day, holding on to hope that someday someone would finally give her a real chance. That afternoon, the diner door swung open forcefully. A tall man rushed inside, his face pale with panic. He was expensively dressed, clearly not someone who normally visited a small diner like this one. "Please," he said loudly, his voice shaking. "Someone help me. My sister, she's not breathing right, she just collapsed in the car outside." The diner fell into stunned silence. Customers looked around nervously, unsure what to do. The manager froze behind the counter, clearly panicking as much as everyone else. Grace did not hesitate. Years of training kicked in immediately. She dropped the tray she was holding and rushed toward the door. "Show me," she said firmly. The man, whose name was Damien Russo, led her outside to a parked black car. Inside the back seat, a young woman was slumped over, her face pale, one side drooping noticeably. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. Grace immediately recognized the signs. "This looks like a stroke," she said urgently. "We need an ambulance right now." "I already called," Damien said, his voice filled with barely controlled panic. "They said 10 minutes. She doesn't have 10 minutes, does she?" Grace's mind raced through everything she had learned during her nursing training. She quickly checked the woman's pulse, her breathing, and the drooping side of her face. "Help me get her flat on her side," Grace instructed. "We need to keep her airway open." Damien, despite his obvious authority and confidence in other situations, immediately followed Grace's instructions without question. Together, they carefully positioned his sister safely. "What's her name?" Grace asked, keeping her voice calm and steady. "Isabella," Damien said. "Please, is she going to be okay?" Grace continued monitoring Isabella's vital signs carefully, speaking softly and reassuringly the entire time, even though her own heart pounded with urgency. She kept Isabella's airway clear, checked her pulse repeatedly, and watched carefully for any changes. Within a few tense minutes, sirens echoed in the distance. The ambulance arrived quickly, and paramedics rushed toward them. Grace immediately gave a clear, professional summary of Isabella's symptoms and the actions she had taken. The lead paramedic looked impressed. "Good work," he said. "Your quick actions likely prevented much more serious damage." As the paramedics loaded Isabella into the ambulance, Damien turned to Grace, his eyes filled with gratitude and disbelief. "You saved her life," he said quietly. "Who are you?" "Grace," she said simply. "Grace Coleman." "You're a nurse?" Damien asked, glancing briefly at her diner uniform, clearly confused by the situation. "I have a nursing degree," Grace said, a hint of sadness creeping into her voice. "But no hospital has hired me yet." Damien studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. Before he could respond, the paramedics urged him to hurry, needing him to accompany his sister to the hospital. "I have to go," Damien said quickly. "But this isn't over. I need to properly thank you." Grace nodded, watching as the ambulance sped away, sirens blaring through the city streets. She stood there for a moment, her hands still slightly shaking from the intense adrenaline of the situation, before slowly walking back into the diner to finish her shift. The other waitresses and customers stared at her with newfound respect and curiosity, but Grace simply picked up her apron again, returning to her normal routine as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Later that night, exhausted from her long shift, Grace sat alone in her small apartment, replaying the events of the day in her mind. She wondered if she would ever hear from the mysterious man again, or if this had simply been a one-time emergency, quickly forgotten once his sister recovered. She had no idea that Damien Russo was not just any grateful stranger. He was one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the entire city, the head of a powerful crime family known as the Russo organization. His sister Isabella was the only family member he trusted completely, the only person capable of softening his otherwise cold and calculated exterior. The next morning, Grace arrived at the diner for her usual shift, expecting nothing unusual. But as she approached the entrance, she noticed a sleek black car parked directly outside, the same car from the day before. Her heart skipped nervously as she saw Damien step out, dressed impeccably, his expression serious yet calm. "Mr. Russo," Grace said cautiously, "is your sister all right?" "She's stable," Damien said. "The doctors say she'll make a full recovery, thanks to your quick thinking yesterday." Relief washed over Grace's face. "I'm so glad to hear that." Damien studied her carefully for a moment, as if making an important decision. "I want to properly repay you for what you did," he said finally. "Come work for my family, as my sister's personal nurse during her recovery." Grace blinked in surprise. I don't understand. You barely know me." "I know enough," Damien said firmly. "You acted quickly, confidently, and skillfully when it mattered most. That's exactly the kind of person I need caring for my sister right now." Grace hesitated, glancing back toward the diner, her mind racing with uncertainty. Working for a wealthy, powerful family sounded appealing, especially after years of rejection from hospitals. But something about Damien's serious tone, and the quiet danger she sensed beneath his controlled exterior, made her nervous. "I need to think about it," Grace said carefully. Damien nodded respectfully. "Take your time. But please, don't take too long. My sister needs proper care, and I trust very few people with something so important." As Damien walked back toward his car, Grace stood frozen at the diner entrance, her heart pounding with excitement and uncertainty. She had no idea that accepting this job offer would completely change her life forever, pulling her into a dangerous, hidden world she never imagined existed. Little did Grace know, powerful enemies were already watching Damien Russo closely, waiting for any sign of weakness, any opportunity to strike against him and his family. Would Grace accept this life-changing opportunity, and what dangers awaited her inside the mysterious world of the Russo family? Grace spent the entire day thinking about Damien's offer. She served coffee, cleared tables, and smiled at customers, but her mind kept drifting back to the strange conversation outside the diner. A private nursing job, working for a powerful family, paying far more than she could ever earn waiting tables. It seemed almost too good to be true. That evening, Grace called her older sister, Denise, hoping to talk through her uncertainty. "You're actually considering this?" Denise asked, her voice filled with concern. "Grace, you don't know anything about this man or his family." "I know," Grace admitted. "But Denise, it's a real nursing job. Something I've wanted for years. And his sister truly needs help." "There's something you're not telling me," Denise said carefully. "What kind of family is this exactly?" Grace hesitated. She had done a quick search online after Damien left the diner. What she found made her stomach twist with worry. Damien Russo's name appeared in several news articles, always connected to rumors of organized crime, though nothing was ever officially proven. "His family has a certain reputation," Grace admitted quietly. Denise sighed heavily. "Grace, please be careful. Getting involved with dangerous people could put your entire life at risk." Despite her sister's warning, Grace could not shake the memory of Isabella's frightened eyes, or the desperate look on Damien's face as he begged for help. She also could not ignore the painful truth of her own situation: years of nursing school, thousands of dollars in student loans, and still no hospital willing to give her a real chance. The next morning, Grace made her decision. She called the number Damien had given her. "I'll take the job," she said firmly. "On one condition. I need to know exactly what I'm getting involved in." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Come to the estate this afternoon," Damien said. "I'll explain everything in person." That afternoon, a car arrived to pick up Grace, driving her far outside the city into a wealthy, secluded neighborhood. The Russo estate was massive, surrounded by tall iron gates and quiet, watchful guards. Grace's heart pounded nervously as she stepped out of the car, taking in the intimidating size of the mansion before her. Damien met her at the entrance, his expression calm but serious. "Thank you for coming," he said, leading her inside. The mansion was elegant, filled with expensive furniture and quiet, careful silence. Grace followed Damien through long hallways until they reached a private study. "Please sit," Damien said, gesturing toward a chair. Grace sat down carefully, her eyes scanning the room nervously. "You said you would explain everything," she reminded him. Damien nodded, taking a seat across from her. "My family has significant business interests throughout the city," he began carefully. "Not all of these business dealings are entirely legal." Grace's heart raced, though she tried to remain calm. "Are you saying you're involved in organized crime?" Damien studied her closely before answering honestly. "Yes." The single word hung heavily in the air between them. Grace felt her pulse quicken, uncertain whether she should feel afraid or strangely relieved by his honesty. "Why are you telling me this so directly?" Grace asked. "Because you deserve honesty," Damien said. "Especially if you're going to be living here, caring for my sister. I won't lie to someone who saved Isabella's life." Grace considered his words carefully. Despite the obvious danger, something about Damien's directness eased her nervousness slightly. "What exactly would my job involve?" "You would care for Isabella full-time during her recovery," Damien explained. "Monitoring her health, assisting with physical therapy, and ensuring she receives proper medical attention. You would live here at the estate, with your own private room, complete privacy, and full security." "And in exchange?" Grace asked. "A salary far greater than anything you've earned as a waitress," Damien said. "Enough to pay off your student loans completely, with plenty left over." Grace's mind raced at the possibility. Still, she hesitated. "What about the danger? If your family has enemies, wouldn't working here put me at risk too?" Damien's expression grew serious. "I won't lie to you, there is always some risk involved in my world. But I promise you complete protection. Nobody outside this estate will even know your name." Grace took a deep breath, weighing the risk against the incredible opportunity being offered. Finally, she nodded. "All right. I'll do it." Damien's shoulders relaxed slightly, relief clear on his face. "Thank you, Grace. Isabella will be grateful for your care." Just then, a nurse from Isabella's medical team entered the room, informing them that Isabella had just woken up and was asking for her brother. "Come," Damien said, standing quickly. "Let's introduce you to her." Grace followed Damien upstairs to a large bedroom that had been converted into a comfortable recovery room. Isabella lay in bed, looking pale and tired, but alert. When she saw Grace, her eyes lit up with recognition. "You're the woman who saved me," Isabella said weakly, her words slightly slurred from the stroke's effects. "I'm glad you're doing better," Grace said gently, moving closer to check Isabella's vital signs out of habit. "Damien told me you'll be helping me recover," Isabella said, glancing toward her brother. "Thank you for agreeing to this." Grace smiled warmly. "I'm happy to help however I can." As Grace began her initial examination, checking Isabella's blood pressure and reflexes, Damien watched quietly from the doorway, his expression thoughtful. There was something about Grace's calm confidence and genuine kindness that intrigued him deeply, something he had rarely encountered among the people constantly surrounding him in his dangerous world. Later that evening, after settling into her new room at the estate, Grace sat quietly, reflecting on the sudden turn her life had taken. Just days ago, she had been an overlooked waitress, dismissed by hospitals despite her qualifications. Now she found herself living inside a mafia family's private estate, caring for the sister of one of the city's most powerful and dangerous men. Grace had no idea that her decision to help Isabella would soon draw dangerous attention from Damien's rivals, powerful enemies eager to exploit any weakness within the Russo family, especially one connected directly to Damien's most vulnerable point, his beloved sister. Outside the estate's high walls, unseen eyes were already watching closely, waiting patiently for the perfect opportunity to strike. What dangers lurked beyond the safety of the Russo estate, and how would Grace's presence unknowingly become the key to a much larger, more dangerous conflict? 2 weeks passed since Grace moved into the Russo estate. Her days quickly settled into a steady routine, checking Isabella's vital signs each morning, helping with physical therapy exercises, and sitting with her during long afternoons of recovery. Isabella's speech slowly improved, and the weakness in her arm grew less noticeable with each passing day. Grace found herself growing genuinely fond of Isabella. Despite her family's dangerous reputation, Isabella was warm, funny, and endlessly curious about the world outside the estate walls. "Tell me about your life before this," Isabella said one afternoon, as Grace helped her practice gripping a small rubber ball with her weaker hand. "There isn't much to tell," Grace said, smiling gently. "School, work, more work." "That sounds lonely," Isabella said softly. Grace shrugged. "It was what I needed to do. Nursing school isn't cheap, and my family didn't have much money to help." Isabella studied her carefully. "Damien mentioned you were rejected from every hospital you applied to. That seems unfair, given how skilled you clearly are." Grace's smile faltered slightly. "The world isn't always fair," she said quietly. "Sometimes people judge you before they even give you a real chance." Isabella reached out with her stronger hand, squeezing Grace's arm gently. "Their loss," she said firmly. "You saved my life, Grace. That matters more than any hospital's foolish judgment." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Damien entered, holding a small stack of papers, his expression unusually tense. "Everything all right?" Grace asked, noticing his serious demeanor immediately. "I need to speak with Isabella privately for a moment," Damien said. "Business matters." Grace nodded respectfully, stepping outside to give them privacy. As she waited in the hallway, she could hear muffled voices through the door, Damien's tone low and urgent, Isabella's voice occasionally rising with concern. A few minutes later, Damien stepped out, his jaw tight with tension. "Is everything okay?" Grace asked carefully. "There have been some threats," Damien said honestly, surprising Grace with his openness. "A rival family has been causing trouble recently. I wanted Isabella aware of increased security around the estate." Grace felt a chill of nervousness creep down her spine. "Should I be worried?" Damien looked at her directly, his expression softening slightly. "You're completely safe here, Grace. I promise you that. But I wanted you informed, given your close involvement with my sister's care." Grace nodded, though she couldn't fully shake her nervousness. "Thank you for telling me." Over the following days, Grace noticed subtle changes around the estate. More guards patrolled the grounds. Security cameras were installed in additional locations. Damien himself seemed more distant and preoccupied, often locked away in his private study for hours at a time. One evening, as Grace walked through the garden after finishing Isabella's nightly checkup, she noticed Damien standing alone near the fountain, staring quietly into the distance. "Can't sleep?" Grace asked gently, approaching him carefully. Damien glanced up, mildly surprised by her presence. "Something like that," he admitted. Grace hesitated before sitting down on a nearby bench. "Do you want to talk about it?" Damien studied her for a long moment, clearly debating whether to open up. Finally, he sighed. "The Moretti family has always been rivals of ours," he explained. "Recently, they've grown bolder, testing our boundaries, searching for weaknesses." "And you think Isabella's illness made you look weak?" Grace guessed carefully. Damien nodded slightly. "Vulnerability is dangerous in my world. Enemies see it as opportunity." Grace considered his words carefully. "Isabella isn't a weakness," she said firmly. "She's your family. Caring about someone isn't weakness, Damien. It's what makes you human." Damien looked at her, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. "You have a surprisingly simple way of viewing complicated situations." "Maybe complicated situations don't always need to be so complicated," Grace replied gently. For a moment, silence settled comfortably between them, the quiet night air surrounding them peacefully despite the tension hidden beneath the estate's calm surface. "Thank you," Damien said suddenly, breaking the silence. "For what?" Grace asked, confused. "For caring for my sister the way you do," Damien said. "And for speaking honestly with me, even though you have every reason to fear my world." Grace smiled softly. "I don't scare easily," she said. "Besides, Isabella deserves the best care possible. That has nothing to do with fear." Damien studied her closely again, clearly intrigued by her calm confidence, so different from the constant fear and calculation surrounding him daily. Their quiet moment was suddenly interrupted by urgent footsteps. Victor rushed into the garden, his expression tense and alarmed. "Sir," Victor said urgently, "we have a problem." Security spotted unfamiliar vehicles circling the estate's perimeter twice in the last hour. Damien's calm expression vanished instantly, replaced by sharp focus. "Moretti's men?" "Possibly," Victor said. "We can't confirm yet, but given recent tensions, it seems likely." Damien turned quickly to Grace, his voice firm and protective. "Go back inside immediately. Stay with Isabella, and don't leave her side until I say it's safe." Grace nodded quickly, her heart pounding with sudden fear as she hurried back toward the mansion. As she rushed through the hallways toward Isabella's room, she couldn't shake the nervous feeling that danger was closing in around them, threatening the fragile peace she had only just begun to find within the Russo estate. Reaching Isabella's room, Grace quickly explained the situation, urging Isabella to remain calm despite her own racing heartbeat. "This isn't unusual," Isabella admitted quietly, though her voice trembled slightly. "But it's never happened this close to the estate before." Grace sat beside Isabella's bed, taking her hand gently to offer comfort, even as her own mind raced anxiously, wondering what kind of danger truly awaited them beyond the estate's high protective walls. Outside, Damien stood firmly with Victor and several armed guards, watching carefully as headlights slowly circled closer to the estate's outer gates, illuminating the darkness with a silent, threatening warning. Would the Moretti family dare attack the Russo estate directly, and if so, was Grace now caught directly in the dangerous crossfire between two powerful, ruthless families? Grace sat beside Isabella's bed for hours, listening to distant voices and footsteps echoing through the mansion. Every sound made her flinch. The clock on the wall showed it was almost 2 in the morning, yet neither woman could think about sleep. "Do you think they'll actually attack?" Grace whispered, trying to keep her voice steady for Isabella's sake. Isabella squeezed Grace's hand gently. "Damien won't let anything happen to us. He never has." Despite Isabella's reassuring words, Grace could see the worry hidden behind her eyes. This was not the first time danger had come close to the family, but something about tonight felt different, more serious. Downstairs, Damien stood in the security room, watching multiple screens showing different angles around the estate. Victor stood beside him, along with several other guards, all tense and alert. "The vehicles left 20 minutes ago," Victor reported. "No further movement detected since." "They were testing our response time," Damien said grimly. "Sending a message that they can reach us whenever they choose." "Should we increase security permanently?" Victor asked. Damien nodded firmly. "Double the guards immediately. I want cameras on every entrance, and I want eyes on Isabella and Grace at all times." "Grace too?" Victor asked, slightly surprised. Damien's expression hardened. If the Morettas somehow discovered her connection to Isabella's recovery, she becomes a target as well. "I won't take that risk." Victor nodded, quickly relaying new instructions to the security team. Damien remained standing at the monitors, his mind racing through every possible scenario. He had built his empire through careful planning and calculated risks, but tonight's unexpected event reminded him just how quickly things could spiral out of control. The following morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone within the estate. Grace finally allowed herself a short nap after Isabella drifted off to sleep, her body finally relaxing from the previous night's tension. When Grace woke a few hours later, she found Damien waiting for her outside Isabella's room. "We need to talk," Damien said seriously. Grace nodded, following him downstairs into his private study once again. This time, the atmosphere felt heavier, filled with unspoken tension. "I owe you honesty," Damien began. "Last night's event wasn't random. The Moretti family has been planning something bigger for weeks. My sources indicate they're preparing for a larger confrontation." Grace's stomach tightened nervously. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the danger surrounding this estate is far from over," Damien admitted. "And it means your safety, as someone connected closely to my family now, is a serious concern." "Are you asking me to leave?" Grace asked quietly, unsure how she felt about the possibility. Damien hesitated, clearly conflicted. "Part of me believes sending you away would be safer for you. But Isabella's recovery still requires your skilled care, and honestly." He paused, searching carefully for the right words. "I've grown to value your presence here, beyond just your medical skills." Grace felt her cheeks warm slightly at his unexpected honesty. "I don't scare easily," she reminded him gently. "I told you that already." Damien studied her closely, clearly weighing his next words carefully. "This isn't like anything you've faced before, Grace. If the Morettas decide to strike directly, people could get hurt, even killed." "I understand the risk," Grace said firmly. "But Isabella needs me, and honestly, I've never felt more sure about anything in my entire life. I'm not going anywhere." Damien's expression softened, clear admiration visible in his eyes. "You're either remarkably brave or a little reckless," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching into a small smile. "Maybe a little of both," Grace replied, smiling back despite the tension surrounding them. Their conversation was interrupted by Victor knocking urgently on the study door. "Sir, we've received a message from the Morettas directly," he said, his voice tense. Damien's smile faded instantly. "What do they want?" Victor hesitated before answering. "They're requesting a meeting. They claim they want peace, but given recent events, it's likely a trap." Damien's jaw tightened with frustration. "Where and when?" "Tomorrow night, neutral territory, the old shipping docks," Victor said. Damien considered this carefully, his mind racing through potential strategies and risks. "Set up the meeting," he finally said. "But increase our security significantly. I won't walk into a trap unprepared." As Victor left to arrange the details, Damien turned back toward Grace, his expression serious once again. "I need you to stay close to Isabella tomorrow night. No matter what happens at the docks, her safety is priority." Grace nodded firmly, despite feeling a growing unease deep within her. "I'll protect her, I promise." Damien looked at her for a long moment, gratitude and something else, something deeper, flickering behind his controlled expression. "Thank you, Grace. I don't know what I'd do without your help right now." That evening, as Grace prepared Isabella for bed, her mind kept drifting back to Damien's words, the unexpected softness in his usually guarded eyes. Despite the danger surrounding them, Grace found herself unable to deny the growing connection forming between herself and the powerful, complicated man she had originally feared. "You like him," Isabella said suddenly, breaking Grace's thoughtful silence. Grace blinked, startled. "What?" "No, I mean, I respect him, but—" Isabella smiled knowingly. "Grace, I've watched my brother interact with countless people throughout my life. I've never seen him open up the way he does around you." Grace felt her cheeks flush again, uncertain how to respond. "This isn't the time to think about feelings," she said quietly. "Not with everything going on." Isabella squeezed her hand gently. "Sometimes, especially during dangerous times, feelings become clearer than ever." Grace considered her words carefully, unable to deny the truth behind them. As she settled into bed later that night, her mind raced anxiously about tomorrow's dangerous meeting at the docks, and the uncertain future awaiting both Damien and herself. Outside, hidden within the shadows surrounding the Russo estate, unseen eyes continued watching closely, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike, unaware of the growing bond quietly forming inside the mansion walls, a bond that could soon become both a strength and a dangerous vulnerability. Would tomorrow's meeting with the Moretti family bring peace, or ignite a war that would threaten everyone Grace had grown to care about? The next evening arrived with a heavy, tense atmosphere hanging over the entire estate. Grace stayed close to Isabella's room, trying to focus on her nursing duties while her mind kept drifting toward Damien, who was preparing to leave for the meeting at the old shipping docks. Around 7 o'clock, Damien appeared at Isabella's door, dressed in a dark suit, his expression calm but serious. He looked at his sister first, then his eyes moved toward Grace. "I wanted to see you both before I left," he said quietly. Isabella reached out weakly, grabbing her brother's hand. "Please be careful," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I always am," Damien said gently, though the tension in his jaw told a different story. Grace stood quietly nearby, unsure what to say. As Damien turned to leave, he paused, glancing back toward her. "Grace," he said softly, "take care of her. And yourself." "I will," Grace promised, her heart pounding nervously. Damien nodded once, then walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Grace listened as the front door closed, followed by the sound of cars driving away into the night. The hours that followed felt unbearably long. Grace tried to keep Isabella distracted with quiet conversation, but both women remained on edge, listening carefully for any sound that might indicate trouble. Meanwhile, Damien's convoy arrived at the old shipping docks just after 8 o'clock. The area was quiet, dimly lit by scattered streetlights, shipping containers casting long shadows across the ground. Victor and several armed guards accompanied Damien, all remaining alert and cautious. Standing near the largest container, surrounded by his own group of guards, was Antonio Moretti, the head of the rival family. He was an older man, sharp-eyed and calculating, known throughout the city for his ruthless reputation. "Damien," Antonio greeted coldly. "Thank you for coming." "You requested this meeting," Damien replied evenly. "I assume you have something important to discuss." Antonio smiled thinly. "Straight to business, as always." "Very well. I propose a truce between our families." Damien studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. "After everything your men have done recently, testing our borders, circling my estate, you expect me to simply trust a sudden offer of peace?" "Trust isn't necessary," Antonio said. "Only mutual benefit. Continued conflict damages both our businesses. I propose we divide territories more clearly, avoiding further unnecessary tension." Damien remained silent for a moment, carefully considering the offer. Something about Antonio's sudden willingness for peace felt suspicious, especially given the recent aggressive actions from his family. "And if I refuse?" Damien asked cautiously. Antonio's expression darkened slightly. "Then unfortunately, conflict becomes inevitable, conflict that could affect everyone close to you, including your recovering sister." Damien's body tensed immediately at the subtle threat. "Careful, Antonio. Threatening my family directly would be a serious mistake." Antonio raised his hands innocently. "No threats, Damien. Merely pointing out reality. Wouldn't peace be simpler for everyone involved?" Before Damien could respond further, Victor suddenly stepped closer, whispering urgently into his ear. Damien's expression shifted instantly from cautious calculation to sharp alarm. "What is it?" Damien asked quietly. "Sir," Victor whispered, "our security team just reported movement near the estate. Multiple vehicles approaching rapidly." Damien's blood ran cold. He immediately understood the truth. This meeting had been nothing more than a distraction, keeping him away from home while an actual attack targeted the estate itself, targeting Isabella and Grace directly. "You planned this from the start," Damien said furiously, turning back toward Antonio. "This meeting was never about peace." Antonio's calm expression finally cracked into a cold, satisfied smile. "Business requires sacrifice, Damien. Your sister has always been your greatest weakness." Rage boiled through Damien's veins, but he forced himself to remain focused. "Victor, get the cars ready. We're leaving immediately." As Damien's group quickly retreated toward their vehicles, Antonio's cold laughter echoed behind them, chilling and confident. Back at the estate, Grace's phone suddenly rang loudly, startling both her and Isabella in the quiet room. She answered quickly, recognizing Victor's urgent voice on the other end. "Grace, listen carefully," Victor said quickly. "The estate is under attack. You need to get Isabella somewhere secure immediately." Grace's heart pounded wildly as she processed his urgent words. "Attack? What do you mean attack?" "There's no time to explain," Victor said urgently. "Get to the safe room now, the one behind Isabella's bedroom closet. Lock yourselves inside immediately." Grace quickly ended the call, turning toward Isabella with wide, frightened eyes. "We need to move right now." Isabella nodded, her face pale with fear, allowing Grace to help her quickly out of bed. Grace guided her carefully toward the hidden closet, revealing a concealed door leading into a small, reinforced safe room. As they stepped inside, Grace quickly locked the heavy door behind them, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Through the thick walls, she could faintly hear distant shouting, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire echoing outside. Isabella grabbed Grace's hand tightly, both women sitting silently in the darkness, terrified and uncertain of what awaited them once the danger outside finally ended. "Is this really happening?" Isabella whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Grace tried to steady her own racing heart, squeezing Isabella's hand reassuringly. "We're safe here," she whispered back, though she wasn't entirely certain herself. "Damien will come. I know he will." Outside, chaos erupted across the estate grounds as armed men clashed violently, gunfire and shouting filling the previously peaceful night air. Damien's convoy raced desperately back toward the estate, fear and fury driving him forward faster than ever before. Would Damien reach the estate in time to save his sister and Grace, or had Antonio Moretti's carefully planned attack already sealed their tragic fate? Inside the small safe room, Grace and Isabella sat huddled together in the darkness, listening anxiously to the muffled sounds of chaos happening somewhere beyond the thick walls. Every gunshot made Grace flinch, her arm wrapped protectively around Isabella's shoulders. "How long has it been?" Isabella whispered, her voice shaking. Grace glanced at her phone, the only source of light in the small room. "About 20 minutes, she said softly, trying to sound calmer than she actually felt. Just then, they heard heavy footsteps approaching outside the hidden door. Both women froze, holding their breath, unsure if help had arrived or if danger had finally found them. "Grace! Isabella!" Damien's voice called out urgently from the other side of the door. Relief flooded through Grace's body as she quickly unlocked the door, revealing Damien standing there, his suit torn and dirty, a fresh cut visible above his eyebrow, but otherwise unharmed. "You're safe," Damien said, pulling both Isabella and Grace into a tight, relieved embrace. "Thank God you're both safe. What happened?" Isabella asked, her voice trembling as Damien helped her gently out of the safe room. "The Morettis attacked the estate while I was distracted at the docks," Damien explained grimly. "But my security team held them off. We've secured the perimeter now." Grace felt her body finally begin to relax, though her hands still trembled from the terrifying ordeal. "Is everyone all right? Your men?" Damien's expression turned serious. "A few injuries, nothing fatal. We were lucky." He paused, looking directly at Grace, his eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper. "You kept Isabella safe. I owe you everything." Grace shook her head gently. "You don't owe me anything, Damien. I care about Isabella. And—" she hesitated slightly, "I care about you too." Damien's serious expression softened immediately, surprise and warmth flickering behind his tired eyes. Before he could respond, Victor appeared at the doorway, his own uniform torn from the earlier fighting. "Sir," Victor said urgently, "we've captured several of Moretti's men. They're willing to talk." Damien's expression hardened again, his focus shifting immediately to the situation at hand. "Take me to them," he said firmly, though he glanced once more toward Grace, silently promising their conversation was far from finished. Downstairs, in a private security room, two of Antonio Moretti's captured men sat tied to chairs, clearly frightened and desperate to survive the situation they now found themselves trapped in. "Talk," Damien demanded coldly. "Tell me everything about Antonio's plans, and perhaps you'll walk away from tonight alive." One of the men quickly began speaking, revealing detailed information about Antonio's operations, his hidden warehouses, and his plans to expand aggressively into Damien's territory through violence and intimidation. Armed with this valuable information, Damien quickly organized a counterattack, striking directly against Antonio's most vulnerable operations before he could regroup and retaliate further. Within days, Damien's swift and decisive actions completely dismantled much of Antonio Moretti's power. Facing overwhelming losses and pressure from his own men, Antonio was finally forced into genuine negotiations, this time sincere and desperate for actual peace, rather than another deceptive trap. With the immediate danger finally resolved, life at the Russo estate slowly returned to a calmer, more peaceful rhythm. Isabella continued her recovery steadily, growing stronger and more independent with each passing week, always grateful for Grace's dedicated care. One quiet evening, weeks after the dangerous conflict had finally ended, Damien found Grace sitting alone in the garden, watching the sunset peacefully. "Mind if I join you?" Damien asked softly. Grace smiled warmly, gesturing toward the empty seat beside her. "Please." They sat together quietly for a moment, enjoying the peaceful evening air, so different from the chaos and danger of recent weeks. "I've been thinking," Damien said finally, breaking the comfortable silence, "about what you said the night of the attack." Grace's heart skipped nervously. About caring for you? Damien nodded, turning to face her directly. I've spent years building walls around myself, trusting almost no one completely. But you've shown me kindness, honesty, and bravery unlike anyone I've ever known. Grace felt her cheeks warm under his intense gaze. I meant every word, Damien. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, I've never felt more sure about anything. Damien reached out gently, taking her hand in his. Grace Coleman, would you consider staying here, not just as Isabella's nurse, but as someone important in my own life as well? Grace's heart swelled with emotion, tears of happiness gently forming in her eyes. I'd like nothing more, she whispered softly. As the sun set beautifully behind them, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink, Damien gently pulled Grace closer, sealing their new beginning with a tender, meaningful kiss. Grace Coleman had once been overlooked and rejected by every hospital in the city, judged unfairly for her appearance rather than her skills and dedication. Yet fate had led her directly into the dangerous, complicated world of the Russo family, where she finally found not only the professional respect she deserved, but genuine love and happiness she never expected to discover. Isabella, watching quietly from her bedroom window above, smiled warmly at the sight of her brother finally finding real happiness, grateful every single day for the kind-hearted waitress who had saved her life, and ultimately, saved her brother's heart as well.